do this?
You're still a piece of shit, huh? Yeah.
So, fuck yes. Welcome to After the Hype. With me, your host, as always, Brian Dressel. With me, as always, is Jonathan Hardesty,
Annunciation,
Emily Blake,
Hello.
and Samantha Garrison.
Hello.
I heard the two R's in there.
Yeah. I decided not to fuck this one up. I think I did pretty great.
Well, now people know what the podcast actually is. I can't find on iTunes.
They are already downloading it. It's not like they're like, oh, what the fuck did I just download?
Welcome to.
It's only like every other episode. Most of them these days. Special guest this week. I figure we're doing a movie with Tom Hanks. Who better than to get than Tom Hanks?
Howdy, partner.
Holy shit. It's him.
That was the best Hanks impression I've ever heard.
Well, you're welcome.
Mr. Elvis Kunesh here. Hi, Elvis.
Hi, howdy. How's everybody doing?
Good. You've already covered this movie on your show, I assume.
I have,
Yeah.
and I did not re-listen to that episode, so I'm guessing this one will be more nuanced.
I don't think anyone has ever described After the Hype as nuanced, but I'll take it.
At least my take on it.
The timing on this episode is really super duper interesting. So that should be.
It is. I'm not sure when this one will come out, but just for a frame of reference, this is being recorded 3 days after the anonymous op-ed for the New York Post Times.
And around the same time, Bob Woodward's book is being released as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like a few days after that. So just so you know where we are mentally when you're listening to this.
I
This
watched
just
this
happened.
the night after that happened.
Yeah.
So I was just like, what the fuck? As I was watching it, I was like, oh my God, we're living in this right now.
Yeah.
And I watched it like last night, and I was like, shoot, I missed my chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't get the benefit of
No,
it.
I missed all the benefit.
No.
I could have. Emily messaged me. I totally missed all this happening. And she's like talking to me on Facebook, like, you should be watching it right now. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to watch it later. Although it's really.
Yeah, I was
really
like,
good timing.
oh man, I can't believe we're doing this movie the week this happened. And Brian was like, week what happened? And I was like, oh boy, I get to be the one to tell you?
Like, week, what happened? That Corin started reaching for his mom? Because that's pretty cool to me. No, not national news? Great.
Hey, it's important.
It's
This
important
just
to two
in.
people.
Man's baby reaches for mom. It does sound like an Onion headline.
It does, right? So before we jump into that whole movie thing, we should do a Where Have You Been Doing? And I can go first. I rewatched the entirety of The Good Place because I loved season 2 and I thought season 1 was pretty mediocre. I thought it was okay and I didn't love it. And then after seeing season 2 and going back to season 1 and knowing the whole point of season 1, it was way more enjoyable. I still think the twist is essential for the end of it. I think if you knew it the whole time, the show wouldn't have worked as well. But knowing the twist and watching it and knowing that this isn't just wheel spinning. This isn't like, we need to get to the end of the show eventually, so we're just going to kill time trying to give Chidi a hobby. And that they're actually torturing Chidi by giving him all the hobbies he'd never want makes those episodes way more entertaining than they were the first time through. So if you were like me and you only kind of mildly enjoyed the first season and loved the second, I'm guessing you will love your second time. Or your second time.
So just have faith it'll pay off. That kind of like, where's this going sort of thing.
No. I'm saying it's
On a rewatch.
On a rewatch.
Oh, got it.
It's phenomenal. On the first time through, you just got to stick through it and you'll enjoy it. And then
That's all I meant. That's all I meant for
Yeah.
the first time through.
Yeah, because I quit before the end of the season. And then I had a friend tell me like, no, go back and watch it, and I did.
I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the one show where you have to just get through season 1 is kind of a legitimate description.
Knowing
Okay.
it and going back, season 1 is far more entertaining.
Yeah.
Those types of things fascinate me. There could be a whole podcast on that, just that
Yeah.
phenomenon.
It's weird, but it
Also,
worked.
The Good Place has a podcast, and they don't call it The Good Podcast, and that really bothers me.
What do they call it?
The Good Place Podcast.
That's a
not
missed
why-
opportunity.
Right?
One extra word.
No, rename your shit.
Come on.
That's a. You know what? Fuck The Good Place. I rescind my recommendation.
I do love that one of the restaurants in the Good Place is called the Good Plates.
That's so good.
See, that's perfect wordplay.
Did they
Like-
use the good
Yeah,
wordplay for
they
that?
weren't called The Good Place Plates.
Yeah. If you live in LA and you go to Universal Studios, the Good Place set is part of the backlot tour, and it's really fun because you can ride through and see the names of all the stores that you don't always necessarily see on camera. It's very cute.
It's cool. Next.
I'll go. I saw The Nun last night.
Ooh.
It was about what you would expect, but I really enjoyed it for what it was.
How much universe building is there in it? It's a legitimate question.
Is it not much actual? Well, yeah. No.
Wait, did the Crooked Man get his own movie yet, or is that
No,
still happening?
It's still happening.
Okay.
The woman who's in charge of the Conjuring universe is now taking over the DC universe, so it's a very legitimate question on whether or not she can build a universe.
I mean, look.
Wait,
it
huh?
ties
What?
into the
Yeah.
other. It ties into the other movies nicely. My favorite thing is that they cast Vera Farmiga's sister Tasia Farmiga as the young postulant, who's the main
That's
character.
kind of awesome.
That's
And,
amazing.
like her, there's something that ties her very nicely to Elaine Warren, and the use of their very similar shaped faces and eyes is really, it's neat. It provides like a good sense of connectivity, even though they don't state it explicitly. And of course, it's bookended by footage of the Warrens. So
Okay. I will see it at some point. I was going to go tonight, and then we decided to, be a family and not leave our 3-month-old son to go see a movie instead.
I'm actually going to go right after this.
And you're going to take Corn with.
Yes.
Cool.
It'll be a bros day out.
Emily, what about you?
I tried really hard to watch Wynonna Earp because all my friends were talking about how great it was, and it was just so melodramatic. They were really eating scenery that I couldn't stay with it.
Is that the Natalie Portman movie?
No, Wynonna Earp, the TV show on Sci-Fi about the
starring
descendant
Natalie
of. No, it's a TV show on Sci-Fi. I don't think Natalie Portman would be in a TV show. On
Wasn't
no
she
offense
in-
to Sci-Fi, but
Because it's when she was in something.
Wynonna
she
Earp
was
is
in
a TV show.
She was in Jane Got a Gun.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking
The-
of.
Oh boy, that movie has a story behind it. Okay, the history of that movie is a mess. But no, Wynonna Earp is a TV show on Sci-Fi, as I've now said like 20 times.
What channel is it on?
64.
And it's about the descendant of Wyatt Earp, and she's the chosen one who has a special gun that she can shoot demons with. And a lot of my girlfriends were talking about it and how great and feminist it is. And I've seen a lot of people talk about how great it is. And I was like, all right, I do like sci-fi shows. I do like feminist. I do like, shit about chicks beating demons with guns and whatnot. They are acting the fucking pants off. I mean, like, every character is like, Wynonna? You gonna shoot me now? You descendant of Wyatt Earp, in case everybody forgot what the plot was? And it's just like, oh my god, everybody bring it down a goddamn notch.
If that's what the show is, you just sold me. If it's anything less than that, I am not watching this fucking thing.
You just set up way too much hype for this show now.
Like, I just imagine somebody with one eye and just turning on the camera in case somebody forgot. And it's like,
That's
oh,
pretty close
I'd
to
be like,
it.
me, I wasn't paying attention.
It's
I
pretty
forgot.
close to it, and I appreciate my friends love this show. I messaged a couple people and I was like, "Is there how many?" Because I got 4 episodes in, and I just eventually I was like, "How long do I give it before everybody stops overacting?"
Well, you got to give it to the next season where it pays it off. We really appreciate it after the
twist.
fact.
So I'm
and then you watched
sorry.
season 1 and it was great.
I'm sorry, I just can't handle that level of like up here all the time, like everyone acting so much and constantly reminding us of who our ancestor is all the time. Yeah. So
What's not to like
sorry
about that?
I tried.
John.
When I watch these shows on Netflix, it comes from a place of distraction. I can't focus on anything, so like I'll watch some of one show and just jump to another show. Into the Badlands is the one I jumped to next. I was watching Supergirl for a while, and then I was like, I don't feel like Supergirl right now. What else can I? Oh, this Into the Badlands. I've heard about it a few times on the podcast, and so I watched the first episode. It was pretty fun.
Should do Preacher next.
Yeah, I might. Yeah.
Oh, Preacher's so good.
Season 3 just ended. Whew.
Yeah.
Good
I
shit,
feel like
man.
season 1 and season 3 are great. Season 2
Totally agree.
But I still feel like that fight scene through the hole in the wall in season 1 is one of the greatest things I've ever seen on television.
So good.
So good.
You should watch Preacher.
Sure. Yeah. I'm in that type of mood where I'll just start watching things and never finish them. It's perfect.
That does.
There was sarcasm in there.
Sure. Was that everybody? Did I skip somebody?
I haven't gone.
I skipped somebody.
I'm just gonna say I've been watching. It just premiered season 2, Anime Crimes Division. It's a web series by Rocket Jump. You can watch it on YouTube for free. You can watch it on Crunchyroll. It's hilarious. One of my good friends is the star of it. You don't have to be into anime to like it. You just kind of have to like really goofy, dumb buddy cop kind of tropes.
It's amazing.
You've seen it?
I've
Yeah.
seen it, yeah.
It's incredible. And
I showed it to someone who isn't as into that sort of stuff, and I was like, "This is great. This is like, look at all these references. This is so funny." And they're like, "What's this?" And I felt so sad.
Okay, maybe you do have to be a little
We do,
into
so
it.
That
That's
took
already-
the wind out of that recommendation.
But if you're
yeah,
into it, it's dynamite. And you probably already know about it, but if you don't, go check it out. Anime Crimes Division. It's great.
I love their opening credit sequence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's all remember it fondly for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good stuff.
What just happened?
Yeah, I was wondering that also.
We just spoke to anime fans.
We're separated girls and guys at the table, and something weird happened on the guy
I've never
end
heard of this
the
thing, and I'm
table.
probably never going to watch it. But they all seem to be enjoying something
Okay,
really
well,
well.
It
so I
seems
just
like
wanted to
everybody
take a
just
moment
circle
for-
jerked over
Yeah.
there. I don't know what's going on.
You clearly have never been to a circle jerk. There's a lot more action.
This is more like a crescent jerk. There's at least 2 people disappointed, or 1 person disappointed.
Let's move into today's episode, which has nothing to do with circle jerks. We're
Are
talking
you sure
Hi,
about
me.
I don't know,
that?
metaphorical circle jerks, maybe.
Sure, yeah, theoretically. We're talking about the post.
Circle jerk and post are probably 2 terms that have never been said in a sentence before when talking about this movie.
Oh, sure. Okay, I was like, I'm sure they have. Post circle.
Post your circle jerk video.
Almost
So
immediately
circle
after
jerk.
circle
Yes.
jerk.
Let's go watch the post.
Yeah. It's a great
And the
cool-down.
circle.
They call it circle.
And the jerk.
Oh, if only Tom Hanks was in The Jerk.
Well, we'll celebrate it on Steve Martin Luther King Jr. Day. My upcoming podcast.
Oh my god.
Review us on iTunes.
I would love if every other episode was a recap of an episode of Luther, and then like Steve Martin.
Not a bad idea.
Oh,
I still think cruise control about Tom Cruise is something that needs to happen.
Well, I mean, I have a long career of failed podcasts ahead of me, so we'll get there.
Sick.
Yeah, what happens after Tom Hanks?
Tom Cruise.
Tom Hanks continues.
And
I
then
know, but like, okay, I guess that's
He's already caught up. Now he's just waiting for
Yeah.
more Tom Hanks
what I
movies.
mean.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do to bide your time?
Guest star on your show.
Before we jump into the post, though, we do have to do something we like to call a 30-second breakdown. Breakdown. Are you ready for this? The post in 30 seconds?
I'm always ready.
Here we go.
All right, so The Post is a movie about the President of the United States lying to the American people, and the media, specifically the newspapers, trying to battle against that while he's trying to censor them. And it takes place in 1971.
I mean, that works.
Yep.
Yeah.
Vietnam is also a thing that's happening.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give it to him.
All right.
That works.
All right.
Yeah. It's the whole movie in there.
There's not a whole lot of plot to this movie.
No.
No, this is
Which is, something.
yeah.
have
We'll
to say
get into
about
that in a moment. But the place that I need to start with this movie, I need to start with this because I think this movie, as good as it was, and we can get into the quality of it, it made a huge, crucial fucking mistake at the end of the movie by showing Watergate and not having it be Forrest Gump. who
Oh my
makes a phone
god, I
call.
was thinking that the whole
Right?
time. Holy shit, yes.
no.
Yes.
Yes, the missed opportunity of the connected Hanks universe.
Right?
Yeah.
Such a fuck up.
Jeez, no.
Like,
No.
oh,
Good thing they're not going. Good thing he's not going to DC to build that universe.
yeah.
God,
I just throwing the TV to the ground in anger. Like,
the
where's Forrest Gump?
only thing I could hate more than Ben Affleck as Batman is a Forrest Gump shared universe. Jesus Christ.
But he is everywhere.
It's a great fucking movie. Sam and I will never see eye to eye on it, which is okay. Our friendship will survive.
But will you see eye to eye on this movie?
I think
I
so.
think we do, actually.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Hooray, we did it.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks brings people together.
But I just want to get that out of the way because as soon as it happened, like that's the
Yeah.
only thing I could think of. I'm like,
Yeah.
man, Tom Hanks has already shot this scene before.
It looked very similar.
It
When
did.
they did the exterior shot, I was
Yeah.
like, this is exactly like the scene from Forrest Gump. Why don't they just use that footage? They didn't have to reshoot shit.
Save some money already.
Yeah.
I like
they
that as a
did on this movie.
I mean, as quickly as it went into print, like as quickly as they put it out, it's
Yeah.
like it wouldn't surprise me if
Yeah.
Spielberg was just like, "Hey, Rob, can I borrow this?"
Yeah.
Wow, it's like he's here.
So we've got an amazing Tom Hanks impression and an amazing Spielberg impression already.
It's like they're with us today.
It's the Impression Podcast.
Speaking of like weird impressions, though, to start with this movie, everyone's accent was so like, I'm a newspaper man. And
Yeah.
I really, okay, like I enjoyed this movie. I thought it was way more interesting than I was expecting it to be. I thought it was very deftly handled because there wasn't a lot of plot. But the fucking accents, it was like...
Bob Odenkirk was doing some kind of like, sometimes he'd be like a New Yorker. And then the next minute he was just Bob Odenkirk.
Well,
it
and
was
Tom
so
Hanks was
inconsistent.
doing his like, I'm a 1940s gumshoe, and also Benedict Cumberbatch is the Grinch, and it was just like, please stop. And like, of course, Meryl Streep is just acting the shit out of everything, so she has to do a voice, and like,
And she has to have her Oscar speech.
yeah, and it was like, I loved all of it, but it was just so distracting. The accents, it's like, just you're American, like you are just like American people that work in the media. Just be like, just talk how you talk.
I have a theory why they do that, though.
Okay.
And I think it's because for the perception of the general movie-going audience, this feels so removed in the past that just Hollywood has colored what people talk like. So it's almost like a period piece. So of course they're going to talk like cartoon characters, because whenever Spielberg does a movie like this, it's like shorthand for history.
It's like when you watch a movie about
Cliff
Romans
Notes.
and everyone's
Yeah.
got a British accent.
Exactly, yeah.
It's just weird because it also takes place at the same time. Like for me, it was also jarring because it takes place around the same time as Mindhunter, which I've been really into. And everybody in Mindhunter just sounds like a person. Because I think even one of the actresses is in Common or something, and it's got like, they got the fashion right. And like it all takes place in offices and important people are saying important things. Except they're saying them like normal people.
That's one of the lessons I remember from watching A Knight's Tale, oddly, is because in A Knight's Tale, they talk like normal people. They have like the Nike swoosh in there. They have like, when they dance to that David Bowie song, they're dancing like more like a modern day, because in the commentary, the director says that it was like, it was meant to be like, to them, that was their modern day. Dancing in those, the fancy moves that we always see from ballroom dancing back in the day. That's exactly how like they would have seen the way we see our dance is like how they would have seen theirs.
Like Shannon Sossaman was a fashion icon, so of course she's wearing weirder shit than
It's
the
just
rest.
it's
so
just
I-
the TARDIS translating it for you.
Yeah, well, but I thought that was a good lesson in filmmaking, is that when you do a period piece, that to the people in that time, they don't know they're in a period piece. They think they're in modern day, so treat it as such.
Worked to great effect in The Last Temptation of Christ, too.
Honestly, the accents didn't bother me at all. The wigs did.
Yeah.
Because there's something about like David Cross with
David
hair
Cross,
just
right?
looks weird.
It was weird.
It was
I
really,
like
it was like upsettingly weird.
Yeah, like, but it
Granted-
wasn't just him. It was like everyone had some sort of like old school like dusty wig on. It was just like,
To be fair, David Cross, his wig wasn't as weird as it was in Goliath season 2.
sure, I guess.
Yeah, no, I had to work on something with that, and it was like, it's like, is that thing just a lot? Like, is it dead on you? Is that like what happened? But it's big.
But
This is
They were
this was actually
really
preferable.
driving home those parallels to Trump. Like everyone has hair that looks like it's from the Uncanny Valley.
Right.
But it was weird because I noticed it, and like the accent, since everyone was doing a weird old school gumshoe accent, I'm like, all right, that's just the world of this movie. But everyone having weird fake hair, for some reason, it just bothered me. And like you know, it's a Spielberg movie when like the small details are what are bothering you, because like
Right.
for a movie with virtually no plot, it's incredibly engaging. Like
Yeah.
the whole way through, it's like you're basically just watching. Like you could argue one day of a job. Like there's more than one, but the heart of the movie is all, we have the documents, we want to publish them. Are we going to or not?
It's all contained within a week.
Yeah.
Like
Except for
that's-
the prologue,
Yeah,
obviously.
the prologue, the last 20 minutes is way extended.
It's like we could tell you wanted to film World War II again. I'm sorry.
But like the beginning and the end, they are different times. But I think the major like push of it is that evening where they're trying to figure out whether or not they're going to publish these articles. And like I remember just like pausing at one point to go feed Corin, and I was like, holy shit, I'm almost done with this movie. Like I thought I was just like starting it.
It moves. It moves at such a good clip.
Yeah, and it's 2 hours long, so it's not a short movie, but it's engaging. It's the right length, I would argue. Like it doesn't like overstay its welcome, like I think some of Spielberg stuff tends to do sometimes, especially his more late stuff. It was just kind of nice to have
And the camera,
that style of filmmaking.
the camera work that made it feel so dynamic didn't feel like camera tricks, because that was
There's a lot of long tracking
yeah,
shots.
but it didn't feel like so often that feels like showing off, and this was just like, no, they're just following people. Like, I didn't always notice, whereas like in contrast to like seeing The Nun last night, where it's like, we're gonna make you scared with a 360 shot. It's like, yeah, this is beautifully done, but I know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Whereas like it felt so immersive.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And John Williams' score really, I love how dramatic his stuff is, and it never just sounds like Hans Zimmer's electro farts. You know, it was just so nice to have when they're like hoisting the newspapers into the van, and it's like, doo, 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 doo. Like, you know, it's like very dramatic, and it's like, yeah, this is fucking dramatic.
However, I have two complaints about this movie. One is I had a really hard time understanding what the fuck they were talking about for the first, like, until the papers actually enter into the picture.
Sure.
Yeah.
I was like really confused about what we were all talking about.
I was very lost until that
It kind of requires a little bit of homework to dive into it.
And the other thing is, I do feel like it does feel immersive, and there are some cool camera shots. But the whole way through the movie, I just kept thinking about, because there's been a lot of movies about newspapers, and I kept thinking about other movies I'd seen that kind of did it better. So I know I'm talking about Spielberg, but
Definitely Newsies.
for sure, Newsies. I mean, obviously, they got newspapers. Is like. They got newspapers.
They dance on them.
They dance on them. But I just kept thinking about other movies I grew up with because I was a journalist for a brief period of time. I was a journalist in high school and college, and then I became a journalist for real for 5 whole months before I realized that in the real world, working on a newspaper is largely sitting in a cubicle, making phone calls, being yelled at by your bosses every time you make a mistake, and interviewing people who don't want to talk to you about boring shit like petroleum. So yeah, that's the world. I don't know. I saw movies like All the President's Men when I was young, and that inspired me to want to get into journalism. And when that didn't turn out to be what it was really like, I was really disappointed and I bailed. But I don't know if I'd seen The Post, if that would have inspired me to go into journalism. I don't know, that felt very like, ooh, newspapers are awesome.
But I don't think that was like, you watch All the President's Men with that's the one about Bob Woodward, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that one.
That's also about Nixon fucking up.
Exactly. Yeah. The very kind of parallel-ish movies, but like that one, I feel glorifies what it is to be a newspaper and to tell the truth and that sort of stuff. And this one felt more of the importance of not lying to the country, and the best way to do that is by using the media. Not necessarily glorifying.
And the weird danger of the free market infringing on the free press.
Sure, yeah.
true.
Yeah,
Really
absolutely.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Like,
But
you guys know how much I love talking about capitalist hellholes. This was tickling my little socialist fake heart. Like,
But there's something to be said where I don't feel like this movie's goal was to glorify the newspaper. It felt more of like glorifying truth in free access to information.
Which does, for me, make the accents and the heightenedness of some of that element weird, because those are almost like the accents are there to glorify that time period, like
and those newspaper tropes.
Those newspaper tropes, and it's just like, I was like, okay, you're going for that, but then you're kind of coming at me with this like more subdued take that ultimately kind of like, I don't know, it just never seem to gel. Once they got the papers and I could kind of get past the accents and we get to the tenseness of it, it worked. But it was those elements, like just that not glorifying it, but then having all this like glorification of like the accents, the hairdo, the weird, like here's this like.
I don't think any of that was glorifying it though. That was just the movie. Like,
but I think it's using things that you would use to glorify those times. Like, look at that grand way we used to speak back in the day. Like, it's using those tricks, and then like not following through with it. I don't know.
I don't know what they didn't follow through on.
Well, they just didn't glorify. Like they were using those techniques to glorify the press in that time period, but they didn't. Like they kept it more subdued. That's kind of what I'm saying. Like that mix didn't quite gel.
Sure.
Like they were treating it like an All the President's Men style film in their performances, but really it was something more nuanced, like Spotlight. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. But that's like, there's so many different, like Emily said, there's so many different movies out there about so many different things about the newspaper, and a lot of times it usually ends on the side of journalists are fucking heroes. Let's all like have a circle jerk to journalists.
Circle jerk.
Yeah.
Circle jerk.
Yeah, I wanted to bring it back.
The word of the day.
Yeah. I don't feel like this one ever did that. Beyond Tom Hanks's character, where he's like, you know, he is like the driving force for all journalists need to be like the spear of truth jutted through America.
The adult we wish we had in the room right now.
Yes. Like beyond that, like it never really felt like it was that sort of movie, which I kind of appreciate because I've seen that movie. I've seen that movie 1,000 times to the point where I hear movies coming out about a newspaper and I just go pass. That's why I didn't see the post until yesterday when I watched it for this.
Ouch.
I'm also really glad, this is strange, but it's kind of to your point at the beginning was confusing. I'm really glad I watched it at home because I tend to watch things with subtitles.
I do too.
Just because it's like when it is a lot of information being thrown at me, it's often easier to read it and then appreciate the performances. Like, you know, I get the truth of the scene one way or two different ways.
Sure.
You know, instead of trying to mush it all together into one thing. I don't know. Makes me sound like I'm slow on the uptake or something.
No,
but
it's completely normal.
but yeah, I watch a lot of things with subtitles, and this one in particular, I was really glad I did because the beginning was throwing so much at you.
Oh, yeah.
And I kept pausing it because my fiance is like, he's studied law, and in particular constitutional law in college. So I was like, explain this. Like, tell me what's happening. You know history better than me. So I had like running commentary.
Yeah, I think if you didn't, this was a movie made for older people. If you didn't live through this, you'd probably be like, what the fuck are we talking about? So
I didn't live through it.
But you understood the whole time what everybody was talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, well, good for you.
Yeah. I mean,
I fucking didn't.
but it was just I had to do research on it in high school and whatnot. So
Oh,
like
well,
I've had to
okay.
pay
You
attention.
were familiar with the
Yeah, I'm
material.
familiar with the material.
It's
Yeah.
really
But I agree with you. I think
Yeah.
like if you didn't have to sit through those classes and stuff that I did,
Like, I had no idea what these
if you
papers were.
exactly if you didn't live through it or you haven't specifically studied it, they don't help you in the beginning. Like until like we've been saying, until the major we have the papers, we're going to write an article, plot kicks off.
You have a MacGuffin.
You're in the dark.
It
See,
was
with the first like 30-40 minutes of the movie where it's kind of like shaky and you don't quite again, as we keep referencing, until the papers actually fall into their laps and it like you lock on. I'm kind of confused because like they hit you with so much information. I have to wonder if that's why we don't like get outside of a couple beats with like Meryl Streep's character Kay Graham, we don't really get any emotional connection to any of the characters. And I think
Even
like
Meryl Streep, I think that's the only emotional connection is it's Meryl Streep.
well, she has
and Bob,
trouble.
Well, Bob Odenkirk's character, just because he had like kind of the real struggle in this movie.
sure, yeah.
And I find Bob Odenkirk just so immediately empathetic anyway. I don't like he's like a Pooh Bear, like a human Pooh Bear. You're just like I love you.
Well, I think you get to that point with the other characters too,
Yeah.
but like
That's it. That's
this is
like what you said.
Spielberg. It's like everything is functional because you need to see the Vietnam sequence to know these people are dying, but you don't care about it. It doesn't
And this man saw that, like he was
Yeah.
part of the study. He was on the ground.
So I wonder if like there's a reason he chose not to like make it as emotionally involved because we've seen him do that countless other times.
He knows how to do it.
Or if it was just like it could have been just like a rushed production
Because he
obviously
ends
this
up
was
doing
very
it at the
fast.
end of the movie. Like, there's
Yeah.
all that emotional connection in like those same things, but I don't have it at the beginning. I was bored in the beginning.
I have to wonder if
but
it's
because I wasn't connecting. I couldn't connect to any one person or
but
I
I-
didn't know who they were.
But I think it's because he was trying to treat the first third of this thing like news.
Yeah.
He wasn't trying to give you a point person or somebody to attach to. He's trying to tell you the facts of what happened as fast as possible to get you into the story that he wants to tell.
Along those lines, I feel like Kay. You mentioned Kay's character, and I feel like Kay started out with that potential, and then we really got a good look at the sexism.
Yeah.
That scene, the one scene I did really like was when they were all in that boardroom together, and she was the only woman, and when she had all the fucking answers, and the who was that at the head of the table? The guy leading the meeting was just ignoring her completely every time she said anything, and then later on we learned that he just has no respect for her whatsoever.
But the interesting thing about that scene particular, because I don't see Meryl Streep do this often. She usually plays very strong women, which is great. But the one moment where they took a beat and the guy to her left tried to let her answer, and she couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I didn't see it that way.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it definitely
I guess
plays
the
that
same thing
way.
had happened to me. It happened to me in a meeting earlier in the day. I was just like, I had the right answer. I was pitching my own project, and I was like really nervous because people had been talking over me already, and I was just like, you just do it. And that's
Yeah, that's what
that's how
happened.
I saw it. Was that she was
Okay.
just like it wasn't that she couldn't, it's that at that point she'd kind of been so defeated. It was like
They're not going to let me talk. So let
It was
at
like-
least so, if he talks,
it was like I
the
did all
points can
this
get out
work.
there.
I want the information out there,
That's-
even if it means giving up
Don't
the
they
Because
also-
she
credit.
smiled. She did that fake smile that we all do when we're like, great. You know, when you know what's
Yeah.
happening, when you know you've just been silenced and you've just been dismissed. So you smile. You pretend everything's fine. And it was this really sad smile.
That's not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially because she is like a socialite woman, so she's known for throwing parties. She's known for being polite and a great host. She went into host mode instead of boss mode, and I don't like that was a moment where she became like truly sympathetic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why it pays off so well at the end, where she's just like, I don't know what to do. What should I do? And then she's just like, she's so uncertain of herself until there's a moment where she goes, fuck you, let's publish. And you're like, yay, you did it. You got there.
In that marvelous gold caftan. Like, that was like one of the coolest dresses I've seen in a movie. It was like a superhero cape. I loved it.
There was that shot where she's walking and passes through all the, I think it's the secretaries before going into the boardroom, where it's like the room she starts off, she's walking down the hall and like it's all women, and then she goes into the room with all the men, and then is that the same scene? Does that lead into that scene, or is that later?
That
I
leads
forget.
into that scene because
Because that's where for me I was like, shit, like that was some solid, like that got me into that moment where I kind of was reading it the way you guys are mentioning it, that like just do it, like it was oppressive. It was like a moment where the filmmaking was like I was in her perspective for that, because it was nice, it was hopeful, and then just oppressive and silencing and just aggressive, and it was a very interesting thing.
Especially since they're all, as is the case in modern political and business, everyone's wearing a black suit.
Yeah.
Like, men, it's weird how we expect men to all dress exactly the fucking same all the time. It freaks me out and I hate it.
Hey, we can accessorize our ties a little bit.
You can wear a flag.
Presently.
The other thing that I thought Meryl Streep's character had to do, and it was definitely helped along with Tom Hanks's speech, but there's something that this movie approaches that I have not seen in many of the other journalism movies that I thought was really important, especially in today's times. Of this movie really brought up the fact that journalists and political figures cannot be friends. They can be civil, they can be friendly, but they cannot have each other's backs if we want to get the truth out there. And there's a speech that Tom Hanks gives, which is his like Oscar clip speech, which is fine. Spielberg always does those, and they kind of drive me up the wall, but whatever. But it led to that moment where she's like, yeah, I have all these friends. They're definitely my friends. And I loved that moment that Tom Hanks just like hits her with, like, he called you because you own the newspaper and he wants you to defend him. And like just that, like Meryl Streep's arc in this movie, which is just never fully like laid out, which is something that not only Spielberg, but Spielberg does so well, of the whole, she needs to completely grow and change and realize who are friends and who are using her. And it turns out almost everyone is using her. And they never say that explicitly. They never try to do anything. It's all done through performance and reactions, and it's so well done. And that's why I think I love this movie as much as I did, because I did not expect to enjoy it, and those are the things that I pulled out of it. I'm like, no, that was brilliant.
the scene where she confronts McNamara and she's like, you saw my son go. You saw all of our friends' sons go, and you didn't say anything. It was like she's approaching him at a human level in a way that he never did for her, and it was
never would.
Yeah, and it was just so heartbreaking because it was like she finally realized it. I thought that was probably my favorite scene in the film.
Mine would be close between that one and the one before that with Tom Hanks, where he talks about like, oh yeah, and then after Kennedy died, his wife looked at me and said, none of this goes in your newspaper. He's like, oh,
That was a great scene.
Yeah, and he
Shit.
got that realization
like
before.
that moment of like, oh, I'm a tool. This sucks.
And everybody grows in this movie because he's
Yeah.
the war. He's been there, but then his wife points out how much harder it is for her.
Yeah,
I love that scene.
Which
That was
underused Sarah Paulson.
Yeah, don't ever underuse Sarah.
Yeah,
She's in like 2 scenes and barely has any lines. It's
but when she
upsetting.
gets to that scene, which is another arguable for the
Yeah.
best scene in the
Yeah.
movie,
That's true.
but yeah,
I also really liked the scenes between, like, Bob Odenkirk's arc in this movie made me happy because it turns out he was kind of a real friend to Daniel, the informant, which that was my favorite part of the beginning. I wanted to get to know that character so much more, and I know his arc's not particularly cinematic since he was literally doing the same thing every day for months, but I loved their moments together where they talk about, like, principles, and he says, like, yeah, I'll publish this, I'll do what you need, because, like, yeah, they had lost touch, but he remembered this guy, and this guy really made an impact on him.
Yeah.
And it was just like, yeah, they were kind of the unsung duo of this movie, and I wanted to see more of them.
There's this great movie. Talk about movies that influenced me. The Paper was like probably number one in why I ended up becoming a journalist. But the Ron Howard movie.
Oh, that's a good movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie. And there's a scene where Marissa Tomei is the reporter, and she meets with this Justice Department guy for a drink. And they're sitting there, and they're making small talk. And then she pauses, and he tells the story, and she fakes laughs at him. And then they pause for a minute. She goes, "So, Tom, did you bring the list?" And then he's like, and he stops, and he realizes that she just came there to get the information from him. And he goes, Did you find any one of my stories funny? And she's like, "No." And he goes, "Okay, I just wanted to know where I stood." And she just goes, "Well, you knew when I called." And I always thought that was such a great, like, if they're a reporter, you know what they want from you. And you're right. You can't really it's hard to be in a friendship with someone who's always going to want information. And that's the transaction. People use journalists. The person who did the op-ed in the Times this week used the Times to publish their opinion. They wanted it out there. So it goes both ways.
Yeah. And this movie, and like I've only done my very vague research in like the history of newspapers and whatnot, but I did it for a while there because it fascinated me. But this time period was a really big growing up point for journalism and politics, because this was a whole lot of like, oh, we need to expose that our government is lying through its teeth to us. And this movie was like, I like that this was kind of like, it tells the catalyst of that. Like you can tell the Woodward story and All the President's Men and all like where it all really shit hit the fan. But I like that this movie really just kind of centered on the tipping point of like, this is where it kicked off of like, we cannot let the government censor us or we are no longer the check to their balance. Like it doesn't work. And I thought this movie did a really good job kind of just telling that specific point. And I like that Spielberg can do that. Like he's like, I just want to tell this story. I could tell the really huge one if I wanted to, or I could just trim it down to just this. But it is kind of interesting as we've been kind of going around. Like he tells that story with interesting characters, but not really like who would you even say the main character of this movie is? There isn't really one. It's more of an ensemble, right?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Streep gets the most arc, but I wouldn't.
But she's not. She
wasn't
wasn't
the protagonist.
She
In
wasn't
the middle of the movie, she's like just barely there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she wasn't in it as much as I thought she was going to be. Like when I saw,
I think Hanks has more screen time.
yeah, I think so. Because like when I saw the trailers for this, it's just Hanks and Meryl Streep, and that's about it in the trailers.
Yeah.
It's like, look who we got in the movie together. Spielberg directed it. We got these two titans in it. It's
Which
gonna be great.
I have a comment about that
Yeah.
later. But finish your thought.
But it's interesting because the rest of the cast is great. Like they have Jesse Plemons in there. I love Jesse Plemons.
He's great.
He's so good. Zach Woods.
I
really
loved
enjoy
it
Zach
when
Woods.
the two of them were on
Yeah,
screen.
like-
That was such a delight.
Like these are younger guys who are like they could be the next huge actors, but right now they're still just kind of like finding like their niche. And like I liked seeing them pop up in this movie. Like the whole cast across the board.
Alison Brie, right?
Alison
like,
Brie.
her
Yeah.
scenes with Meryl Streep were
Super
great.
tiny,
like,
but yeah.
Yeah, very small, like
but
smallish
really
role,
powerful
but very powerful,
when they were
important
interacting.
role.
Like,
Yeah,
to see her hold her own against Meryl Streep, I was like so proud of her because I just love her so much. I was like, you go, girl.
Yes. That must have been very intimidating to realize you were about to act with Meryl Streep.
Yeah.
By
Yeah.
just the two of you.
Yeah,
Like, oh, fuck.
and
Like,
you
you have
have to lecture her as
Yeah.
her
Oh,
daughter.
yeah.
you have to talk down to Meryl Streep. Good luck.
Wow.
But you have that, and then you have like Jesse Plemons playing one-on-one with Tom Hanks. It's
Yeah,
like
that's true.
these younger new actors playing with like some of the best of the best of the best, and it's very interesting to see how they all can
And
kind of work
I
together.
love that. I love those characters in their scene too, because the stuff that they brought up when the guy's like, "Well, this is why the lawyers are here." I mean, like
Yeah.
it's because, and it's very true. Is you do have to worry, like legally. I mean, the New York Times before they published that op-ed had a lot of fucking discussions with the lawyers. I'm sure they brought one in, and we're like, okay, what can we get away? You know, they know you study the law before you publish it like that.
Yeah.
It's very important to always know.
Well, and there's definitely a reason it was an op-ed.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly,
like
and not a
I can get into that whole thing later. Grumble.
But yeah, to your point about how this is the story he wanted to tell, I
Yeah.
think that's actually why there's no main character,
Yeah,
and
that makes
why
sense.
everybody's a little thin is because he really went for clarity with this movie, and that way I kind of think it's like it's a film constructed like a newspaper, and that it has to be a certain like fifth
They can't be
grade
friends
reading
with
level.
them. They can't be friends with them.
Well, that's it.
right.
And there's a reason that newspaper movies you don't really ever have one character. The closest you get is All the President's Men, where you have two characters, and even then there are other characters who play huge parts in what happened. Nobody in a newsroom, the idea of like one reporter setting out, people in the newsroom all have pieces. Like the only professional newsroom I ever worked in, one of the things that was a real problem is they made us work in these really high cubicles, and it was like, what? I need to get something from the guy. I need to get information from the guy across from me like all day long, and yet I can't see him. So that's why in newsrooms you don't see cubicles ever, except that one place, which was stupid. Because a newsroom is a team. Everybody works together, and that is one thing this movie showed that a lot of newspaper movies do. But like, it's one thing it showed very well is everybody working as a team. So it would have been not as good probably, or not as accurate to have like one person be the hero of the movie, because that's not how it works.
Yeah, I think the only movie that I can think of where it's like one guy, and even that's still kind of two, would be Zodiac, because that one's like it's mostly Jake Gyllenhaal driving it, but otherwise, yeah, it's mostly a team because it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like the Avengers.
Yeah,
Yeah, but really
Perfect
boring by
comparison.
comparison.
What haven't we hit on this thing? What else? There's so much to kind of dissect in this, but
Well, I to go back to what you were saying with the two titans and
Sure.
this being Spielberg, I want to ask you guys a question. Is it weird that the movie it's directed by Steven Spielberg and stars Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep is this movie?
Yeah.
Does it feel a little
It feels
underwhelming?
weird. I didn't.
Yeah.
I forgot that Spielberg directed it. So at the end of the movie, when it was like directed by Steven Spielberg, I was like, "Oh shit, really? Oh."
Like they're all doing really good work, but when you consider like this pool
There's
of
no
talent
dinosaurs in it at all. There's not
Full of
even a
talent.
dog in it.
or a pirate ship.
Yeah.
On second thought, I've decided not to endorse this newspaper.
It just feels like everybody's doing good work here, but outside of probably Liz Hannah, the screenwriter, no one is like dying for this movie, and I think you can kind of tell.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
They're
on
all
that.
masters, so that's why it's still really good.
It's really good, but
Showed
yeah.
up for work today.
Yeah.
here's the thing: is I don't think I've ever seen Meryl Streep give a bad performance. I think she's given less than perfect, but she's always good. And I think Tom Hanks is kind of the same way. Like,
Yeah.
they might have movies that aren't great, but they always, when they show up, I don't think it's ever just a paycheck for them. I think when you hire them, you get them.
But I guess the question is like, what drew them, like other than Spielberg himself, what drew them to this movie?
That's where this movie's so interesting, because it feels like a first draft of something that could have been truly exceptional. And I do think it's very much a product of its time. Like it's like they saw this election season, the past election season happening and stuff, and Spielberg like, I have this script. How do I get this made quickly? Tom, Meryl, let's do this.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's kind of how it felt. It feels very much like a response to a moment versus like a seminal classic of journalism cinema.
It's also really interesting that this movie chose to tell the story of the Post and not the New York Times, because the New York Times were the first ones to get the papers, and yet
The Post is the one that pushed it.
Yeah, I know,
Out
but
of
it's
the
weird that
legal
it was
realm.
just like it's sort of passive in the way that New York Times got it first, and so the whole movie we're like, well, we're not the ones who found them, we're the ones who found them again. So that it's just, I don't know, it was an interesting choice.
It felt like there could have been two movies. Not
This is
necessarily two movies,
also the response to a cultural moment, because this is very much also a movie, like I said, about what happens when profit could potentially supersede the purpose of a newspaper. And the Washington Post did just get bought by Jeff Bezos.
Yep.
Like, this is very much like there's so many interesting parallels to draw to today, like from the Washington Post IPO to now when it's owned by a choder who doesn't even pay taxes, to report on another choder who doesn't even pay taxes. Like, I just feel like it was the more important story to tell, but I wanted like another draft of the script or a little bit more time.
Did it need to punch more? Did it need to be like more like sharp?
It was, to quote Meryl Streep, a first draft of history.
I would have liked to see more Matthew Rhys. I think that's a thing it could have used, is a little bit more about the actual person who was risking everything to come out with this.
Well, I feel like you're all kind of scratching it. It's just like, I feel like it's like kind of like what Elvis was saying. Like, you do have three of them, like the most important people in filmmaking history. You have one of the most important stories in newspaper history. You have all these incredibly important, timely both to then and now. And what we get is a good movie. Like everything feels like you could have punched just one notch higher, and this would have been the new All the President's Men for this generation. Like, it would have been that generational film if we'd gotten more from that character, if we'd gotten more from Tom and Meryl, like if we'd just gotten more. But since we had this 2-hour movie that moves along at a very good pace, and it's entertaining, and it's disposable enough, and it's entertaining enough that we all kind of enjoy it, and we can have a good conversation about it, but it still kind of leaves us all wanting.
And it's weird that like for a movie that's about such challenging things doesn't challenge anything. Either.
Yeah.
It's like, because it's
working.
workman.
That's Spielberg, though.
Yeah, and
Spielberg
that
doesn't challenge. Like, that's,
and
I
I
love
feel
him, but
and I think that's where it loses the thread a little bit for me, is that I don't know, for something like this that's so important, it didn't feel important.
You know, one thing that I just thought about is when we did our Spielberg battle, the constant like common element all our movies had, and that we kind of went after, was that they all were like wonder. It was all about wonder. There's no wonder in this movie. It's much more factual.
with that said, like,
and
I'd still
efficient
rather get a movie like this from him now than Ready Player One. Like,
Yeah.
as much as I enjoy Ready Player
true.
One, but that's just him spinning his wheels. Like, he knows how to do that. He might do it better than anyone else, but that's. I'd rather see him try something and push himself, and I feel like this did that.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of like I had the same problem with Lincoln that I did with this one. It's like, you don't like. I see what story you want to tell, and you're doing a very good job of it, but maybe you should focus on something else. Is kind of what I got from this one, and they both pushed just one hair too long. Where we saw the beginning of Watergate, we saw the assassination. It's like, your story ended. We don't need this part.
You don't need to remind us that there's actually a much flashier scandal coming up than
Yeah,
this
like
one.
both those movies.
Unless it is a sequel to.
Yeah.
and that's the thing, is like they teased it like it was an
Post
MCU
2.
movie.
Well, the Post 2 would be All the President's Men.
Because I laughed at the end of this movie, and because it was funny, because it was like, here we are, here's the sequel, Watergate's happening. It felt like a post MCU credit sequence, or like, stay tuned, Watergate's coming.
If Sam Jackson had voiced the security guard.
Yeah,
Oh my god! Before he
we got a
lost the
motherfucking
eye.
breach in this.
God.
I'm tired of these motherfucking flashlights across the fucking street.
Why are you motherfuckers putting tape on the doors?
I also wonder if like that approach where it's like you're right, it's cutesy at the end.
It goes weird,
And
yeah.
that-
Cutesy.
Especially since it makes you think of Forrest Gump immediately.
Yeah, well, I mean that's unfortunate for another reason, but it dilutes any teeth it did have, and I think that kind of speaks to
The template had more teeth than this movie that they were using for their paper.
I think the problem is the Pentagon Papers, in the end, the release of them, as far as I can tell, I mean, because Nixon didn't go home over the Pentagon Papers. He went home because of Watergate. So
Yeah.
it's hard to have a really satisfying conclusion to the movie when publishing them was a big deal and nothing that's really dramatic came of it. So what do you do? The next you go, and then Watergate happened.
That's where it was unfortunate too, because they opened on the Vietnam War, and the Pentagon Papers were what ultimately turned the tide and helped us get out of Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so that's where it was kind of really unfortunate, because you open on this scene of like sacrifice and sadness and like needless death, and it would have been, I think, a better resolution would have been seeing the boys come home.
Yeah,
Because they
for
instead,
sure.
because by having that opening, that's the ending that we, as an audience, I would say we earned.
Yeah.
And instead they went for because of this event, all of the Watergate stuff was able to happen. Because if we didn't set the precedent with this event, the Woodward
That's
stuff.
so much more abstract.
Exactly.
But then, like-
you have to know history of newspaper and know, like, because of this event, this was able to happen. So they just kind of wink at you and say, hey, check this out.
So the movie too forgets about the boys coming home. Like, they forget about the boys just like the government does, and it's like this weird, unconscious, like, oops, there was a war? We forgot about this.
What do you going back to what do you guys think is the purpose of this movie, the intended purpose?
Oscar. Oh, sorry.
Wow.
Well, it's also like,
fair.
hey, Donald Trump's an asshole, and newspapers should. I mean, it's very much meant for I don't know when they started working on it, but they definitely geared it toward learning a lesson about how the newspapers are not the enemy.
Yeah, that's, I think, the main theme of this thing is that, the newspaper is meant to be a check on power.
Yeah. The
I
purpose
think-
You
of
said it a lot
so,
cleaner than I
too.
just
Yeah.
did.
the purpose of this was to represent a cultural moment,
Yeah.
not necessarily to have staying power.
Yeah, and I think that's true too, and I just have to wonder. Yeah, I think it's kind of similar to Lincoln. Like, yeah, if he was just going to tell this one story, maybe we did need to editorialize the movie and just lose the beginning and the end, or I guess keep the end of this one. Yeah, it's interesting because like, did it actually work? Is the question I wonder.
I honestly, and this is where it's always going to be a problem, and it's not their fault. It's definitely not their fault. When you have Spielberg, Meryl Streep, and Tom Hanks in a movie, whatever message you're trying to get across is going to be lost in the fact that you have Spielberg, Tom Hanks, and Meryl Streep. Because people go for the names, they don't go for the movie. And like, there's some of the very few people left in the film industry that still draw on their presence alone. So like, did it work? I don't think so, because they had the wrong cast. If they wanted to actually get their point across, you need to lose the A-listers.
But they wouldn't have been able to make this movie
Exactly.
in
Yeah.
the time
Total-
that they were able to
But
do
I gotta
it.
be
which
honest,
Totally
is
agree.
bad.
if I had known Matthew Rhys was in it, especially if they had put Matthew Rhys in more scenes, that would have drawn me to this movie far more than a Meryl Streep, Tom Hanks would.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm talking more for general audiences. We work in the film industry. We watch at least 52 movies a year just for this
People
podcast
watch
alone.
The Americans; they recognize him from that.
Yeah, but like, I'm just saying, like the cast alone was A, how they got it made as quickly as they did, and B, why it made any money and any Oscar noms whatsoever. But I think if the story they want to tell and the message they wanted to tell, having that cast is immediately going to detract from anything just because of who they are. Personally, is what I take from this sort of thing. Because
Yeah, actors don't open movies like they used to.
no, not at all. There's a very good articles that I will never attempt to even replicate that talk about the death of the names opening movies. There's only, I think, 4 left that can do it in America. Internationally there's a whole different rules, but American it's different. I think we
Jack
should move to
Black.
quotes. Yep, Jack Black's the one. He was in a movie with one of them.
That's true. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite quote?
Favorite quote. Oh, actually, before we do that, I have to ask you guys: Did anybody watch any bonus features?
No, I rented it on Amazon.
Okay. So I found out on the DVD there's a bonus feature that's called PSA. What do you think the PSA is about?
It's about how Donald Trump's an asshole.
No.
Okay, well, that's all I have.
Not to pirate movies.
No. Like you would expect. I mean, none of you said it. I expected it. It was like, oh, it's going to be like about the press,
Yeah, that's
journalism,
what I figured.
newspaper.
Yeah.
It's a non-smoking PSA because everybody smokes in this movie.
That's awesome.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things of watching period movies are just, hey, look, they're all smoking in their houses.
Yeah.
Your houses smell like ass. All right, my favorite quote, it's an Odenkirk quote, just because, Bob Odenkirk's in your movie. Something he's going to say is going to be my favorite quote, because that's just what you get for using Bob Odenkirk. But this one's actually a very kind of, I think it's timely to today, and a lot of people's attitude to today. He answers very honestly to the question that is posed to him, wouldn't you go to jail to stop
damn
this
it.
war? Sorry. And his answer is theoretically sure. That's a very 2018 response of like, would you be willing to do this to save your neighbor? Well, theoretically, yes. It's not so theoretical anymore.
Yeah. See, there's cutting stuff in this movie.
Yeah.
That was my quote.
I'm not apologizing. I was going to, but I already kind of did, and I didn't mean that one, so I should just let you know. None of them were honest. Forrest Gump rules.
I went with a long Tom Hanks line because as someone who was in love with journalism until I actually did it, didn't realize it's a lot of calling people on the phone, which I hate. Don't become a journalist if you hate calling people on the phone. FYI, just a thing.
Or an office PA.
Or
Oh,
yeah.
God.
But it also speaks to where we are right now. Like, it was a very, very timely message, like directly aimed out the TV at the current press right now. And just watching Tom Hanks say this the same day that op-ed had been released, the same week that Bob Woodward released his book, hearing the president call the press the enemy of the people. This quote is very fucking relevant. And it's if they don't publish, he's talking about if we don't publish, it will look like we're afraid. We will lose. The country will lose. Nixon wins. Nixon wins this one and the next one and all the ones after that because we were scared. Because the only way to assert the right to publish is to publish.
Yeah, we're about to lose that fight, I'm afraid. I hope I'm wrong. Really hope I'm wrong.
Way to like immediately cut the passion in that with like depression.
With my very pessimistic outlook
No,
on
I
current
think we'll be
standings.
okay. Because, like, the one dope thing about a conservative Supreme Court is they're all constitutionalists, and they really dig the First Amendment. As weird as that
That's-
sounds, like, that's
Yeah,
the
you're right.
one bit of optimism that we can hold on to.
As I'm being put in my red dress and got to put my little Handmaid's Tale.
Actually,
on.
okay, never. I have to. There's some really cool shit that I'll share with you after this.
Okay.
But it's never going to be that dire either. Anyway, can I go since
Yes,
you
please
thieved my
do.
quote?
You
Newspapers.
Hold on a second.
I thought you were like, "Can I go?" Like you were just like, "I need to leave."
Oh God, I mean,
gonna fucking
I am
go.
like dripping.
Oh.
Yeah, it's mighty hot in here.
My undershirt was a bad idea.
My existence here in this room was a bad idea.
Newspapers are the first draft of history. Dicks.
You're going to say that one more time.
No, oh fine. Newspapers are the first draft of history.
Oh,
That was
a
a
good
good
one.
quote.
That was a good quote.
That was a good
That
quote.
was just the only one I remembered since you stole mine.
Again, I don't apologize.
I don't care.
We mentioned it in the podcast, but I like the quote from Sarah Paulson when she's talking about the whole thing that Kay is going through, and just Kay's in a position she never thought she'd be in, a position I'm sure plenty of people don't think she should have. When you're told time and time again that you're not good enough, that your opinion doesn't matter as much, when they don't just look past you, when to them you're not even there. When I'm reading this off. When that's been your reality for so long, it's hard not to let yourself think it's true. So to make this decision, to risk her fortune in a company that's been her entire life, well, I think that's brave. And I just like her kind of, like that she said it. It was kind of an awakening moment. And I just like that whole conversation, how it was couched. And he's like, well, I'm brave. And then she just kind of lets it into him with it. And I think the point's very good and something that we don't obviously think about.
Was that everybody? Did you go?
No.
Stop forgetting Elvis.
I know. Well, usually I say, all right, next, and everyone's already gone. So this time I'm trying to just jump the gun and make sure that I'm not doing it
You
this
failed
time.
this
No,
one.
no.
It's a big fail.
Well, I think
Elvis is hurt by it.
I think he's fine.
I'll live. Well, I think I have the same character flaw that Spielberg has, because after all of those inspiring quotes, I want to leave you with a laugh, a smile, because there's a great cranky Hanks in this movie. That's a whole thing that we didn't really touch on, but you can listen to my podcast for all of that.
What's your podcast called, Elvis?
Tom Hanks Giving. Look it up on all the podcast apps. It's there.
Is it on Spotify?
It's probably not on Spotify.
Well,
It's
so
not
much-
on there, but look at Apple
so much
Podcasts.
for all of the podcasts.
Well, thanks for showing me up. But my favorite quote was from Hanks when they just get the papers and they're trying to make a move, and he talks to the reporters like, how soon can you get this? And he's like, by Thursday. And he's like, well, what if we pretended you were a reporter and not a novelist?
Oh yeah.
Such a good line.
Oh, that's amazing.
Or when I love that scene where that one reporter's got the fucking papers and he like tries to come into the office and Tom
No.
Hanks is like, no.
Craig Hanks, he's the best.
And that guy too, that reporter trying really hard to be like, well, the girl, she had a skirt, and no one's fucking listening to him.
I love that he
Great.
continued his thought. That was so
Just
amazing.
keep talking, buddy. Someone might tune in at one point or another. So for today's review system, we are skipping it because it's hot as fuck in here, and
It
I
is
want to get
very
done with this
hot.
episode.
The paper.
So we're just gonna move into plugs. Again, Venture Brothers podcast. Check us out, and then I'll let Sam plug her own show when we get around to that one. Elvis, anything to plug?
Tom Hanks Giving podcast, mentioned before. We are in Hanks-atus until his next movie, but we have the whole back catalog of every movie. And
It sounds like a really bad disease.
That's the first draft of that statement.
I'm sticking with it. Hanks-atus.
Hank's anus?
Hanks-atus. That's like
I'm a really
hiatus.
bad case of Hanks.
Okay,
You're in
all
Hanks'
right.
anus?
Oh,
Man,
and
what a
Did
Wednesday
you hear
night.
what happened to Elvis? He got Hank's anus.
And you can hear that anytime you listen to the podcast. It's great. Otherwise, follow me on Twitter at Elvis Kaboom.
Cool. John, anything to plug?
Just go to our website, rate and review us on iTunes and all that good stuff. I've got a podcast coming out. Still working on the details of that.
Sooner or later.
Yeah.
I'm booked up for Halloween. I don't have any time to do shit.
So go to EmilyNoLongerSews.com.
It's EmilyNoLongerSewsForYou.com.
There you can get on a wait list for EmilySews.com.
Emily Blake Sews.
Sorry. Emily Blake, no
What?
longer sews.com. Got to get these websites right or people won't know where to go.
Yeah.
Welcome to blah, 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 after the hype.
Sam?
So I have a podcast coming out, or it exists. It depends on when this episode is released, but in the very near future. It's called Sam Wise. It's an advice podcast because I believe every question, and I literally mean that, every question in life can be answered by watching the Lord of the Rings Blu-rays in their extended editions. So if you have any questions, submit them to sam.wise.ath@gmail.com and tune in. It'll be on the same feed as After the Hype while it finds its feet. And then it'll hopefully blossom into its own beautiful little thing.
And it'll soar like the eagles that show up conveniently.
It's not a matter of
I know.
convenience,
I'm with you
okay?
on this.
Anyway, so, and you'll find out why if you listen to the podcast, because I actually do address that. Anyway.
Sweet.
And
I'm here for that. I'm here for eagle discourse.
My next statement concerns you. You need to stand down. So if you go to athpod.com, we also have a dope as fuck blog. We post every Wednesday and most Fridays. It's great. You should check it out. We have something for, and once Samwise starts, we'll have something for you every day of the week. You got Venture Bros on Monday, Samwise on Tuesday, a dope ass article on Wednesday, After the Hype, the OG on Thursdays, and then Friday, a delightful little editorial. So, athpod.com, homies.
And then we might end up with Saturdays and Sundays at some point. We might go crazy.
I had an idea for a new thing during the last.
See, it just keeps happening. We're doing this, guys.
Yeah.
You got to be here for it.
athpod.com for literally everything we just said.
So much. So
Yeah.
Except for
much
Tom
content.
Hanks giving.
Except for Tom Hanks.
And
giving.
Emily Blake doesn't sew.com.
That's not
That
a,
is
for the record, that is not a, don't go there.
You need to you need to buy that URL now.
I am
I
so
do.
going to buy that URL.
This could be your Saturday and Sundays, guys.
No,
I'm
but
just saying.
Emily Blake no longer sews.
Yeah.
Okay.
Emily Blake no longer says
It's
that.
like a binary counter. Like,
Is
does
that
she sew today?
everything, though?
No, she doesn't
Because
sew
it
today.
is like
get
really
Emily-
hot.
Yeah, we need to
Yeah.
finish it. So,
We're delirious.
Bye.